I don't have much of a statement. I mean, basically, we're in the middle of a grind. It's kind of cool. You know, the coaches, the scouts, we're all working pretty much 24/7 on this draft. It's a great process. The scouts are in now. I'm working with the scouts on the draft, the coaches with Coach Gruden. I'm jumping between rooms. It's really been awesome. Been a great process, especially with what we've got with 8 picks and 4 of the first 35. So, having said that, what do you want to talk about?
You learn anything new about yourself as an evaluator, seeing it from this angle for the first time?
I think the important thing is I think you always have to go back to just trusting who you are as an evaluator. We've talked about this a little bit before, and the great thing for me is I've got all these resources now with the scouts and the coaches to bounce a bunch of stuff off that I didn't have as much before. So now I can look at something and say, man, that kid just ran a lot faster at his pro day than I thought he was, or a lot slower at his pro day in the case of some guys this year. And we've had to go back and really grind it. And but I think that the answer to your question is probably what, at the end of the day, despite all the pressure and all the influence, you just kind of have to close the door and get your headspace back and say, what do I believe in, and who do I want to fight for in this draft?
Is there a way to prepare for, as a first timer on this side of it, is there a way to prepare for the juice and the energy of the moment when the hourglass sand is ticking down and you're in that? Have you talked to people about that environment and how it changes things?
Yeah, I think what we're going to do is try to have our board completely stacked, both by position and by number, by the end of next week. And then the week of the draft, I think we're going to spend an awful lot of time in there, in our war room, our draft room, with the people that are going to be there and kind of going through every scenario we can. I'm going to have people calling in on the phones and trying to get John and I rattled and propose trades. And, let's be honest, I haven't done it before. So, again, if I'm going to evaluate myself, I got to make sure I'm prepared. There's 2 minutes left on the clock and 3 phones are ringing and there's a trade. And, what is the process? How are we going to react as a team? Where's everybody even sitting in the room? What's the feedback? How quickly am I going to get the information on the trades and the point values? And so there's a whole bunch of stuff, and I've kind of got it. I said to John, it's kind of like it's game week, and we want to get in there and practice our game plan, no different than the team would for a Sunday game.
How do you prepare for something that you've never experienced in terms of being in that war room and taking those calls? Like, who have you leaned on and what sort of
Well, I think over the last 18 years or whatever, I've got pretty good feedback for what happens, how it happens, the pressures, the time frames. I've talked to a lot of people in this building about how they've done it in the past. Where's everybody sitting? What's up on the boards? I've changed some things already with what's going to be up in the room and some of the information available to us and how it's going to how we're going to process that information. I think the important thing, Michael, is at the end of the day is just some of these practices, putting some pressure on ourselves and hoping, just like a coach would, hoping that if we put enough pressure on ourselves Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday under a bunch of different kind of conversations and trades, and that when Thursday night comes and Friday, Saturday, we're more than prepared to deal with anything.
Trade chart. Do you have one? Do you use one of the ones that are out there? Obviously, a few different ones that are out there.
I've had trade charts forever. I mean, that was my job, and teams would share their trade charts with me. And to be honest, I think I saw Coach Belichick quoted the other day about them. Something they're all within points of being the same thing. So if you're on the clock and you got 2 minutes left and somebody's calling about a trade, unless it's for an existing NFL player, you got to have a way to see what the benchmark is quickly. And I think all teams are using these trade charts that are very, very similar. Now, you got to use your gut a little bit, and there are different times where you might want to get more, and there are other times you might take less. But that's kind of the benchmark to start with.
Yeah. General sense, you have sorry, go ahead.
Jerry, I'm having lots of those moments.
How different does your board look preparing it for one team than it would have looked preparing it in your old job? Is it pretty similar, your evaluations, or when you're evaluating for a specific team, is it changed a lot?
Yeah, it's a lot different. I think my old job was to try to be the GM for all 32 teams, and I had a board that was stacked for what I would call league value. Now, oh, wow, that was a lot of clicks just because I went like that. That was really weird. So league value is one thing, you know, and what I used to do in my old job was I'd talk to a bunch of GMs and head coaches the week before the draft. I'd send them my board because they'd want to see it. To them, it was league value, so it was a tool for the teams to use, and it was a way for me to talk about my board where it might have some weaknesses. So now you're just doing it for one team. Now, I still have to be aware, and we're working really hard on understanding what the team needs are and the scenarios are around the league. And I think league value is a way to kind of understand where you might be able to move up or down in the draft. So understanding league value is still a part of it, but understanding what we want to do as Raiders is the biggest piece.
How integral is it when you're trying to imagine scenarios that could arise on draft day to know what the needs are of teams picking in front of you, teams that are picking in behind you that could move up? Just simulate. I have an idea of what the motivations are for those other teams surrounding you.
I think it's really important to understand what the other teams are doing and trying to do. We're spending a lot of time putting together some information on all other 31 teams, their decision makers, what the decision makers' footprint looks like historically, what their needs are this year. I think we've worked hard since I've been here at establishing, or continuing relationships with the GMs I've had around, just in a different fashion now. Instead of calling up and saying, "Hey, you know, what do you think about this?" It's more like continuing to open up lines of communication for draft night. And I've had a lot of those calls and taken a lot of calls, and it's really been fun.
As you talk to those other guys around the league, do you notice any of them ever kind of like slipping up and kind of forgetting your role now and kind of going into that old
No, I think they're all trying to
pattern?
get me to slip up and forget about it. But I've had a lot of texts and phone calls that have been very funny where guys were like, you know, I miss just being able to talk a ball with you. And I'm like, yeah, same thing. You know, who are you going to take? And so it's been fun.
Mike, you've been very busy through free agency, this off-season. How well do you feel all of these acquisitions and moves have set you guys up for what you're trying to do in the draft?
Yeah, I think we feel pretty good. We made some major acquisitions early. And since then, I think we've been kind of connecting the dots the best we can with available free agents, not just positions of need, but anywhere, positions of need, depth, whatever. I think we've done a pretty good job of signing younger players for the most part to prove it contracts where it will help both them and us if they play well.
Mike, your predecessor here, Reggie McKenzie, his first draft with the Raiders, he didn't have first or second round picks. That's a tough position for a team, obviously. But in a sense, maybe he got a pass for that first draft. You're kind of in the opposite position with 3 first-round picks. Do you sense how important this draft might be for your reputation? Do you embrace that, or how do you approach it?
I don't really worry about it, in all honesty. The way I look at this thing from a how do people perceive me perspective is a lot of people doubted that anybody should come out of the media and go be a GM for any team. I know that. I get that. But at the end of the day, here's the deal. If we win, everything will be fine. And if we lose, I'll get fired. And I'm perfectly fine with that.
Having 4 in the top 35 gives you a lot of freedom or ammunition or whatever term that you want to use for it. Coming into a draft with that type of capital early on, how does that does it change or alter your thinking because you have the freedom and the capital to move up or down or do whatever you want? Really?
As John keeps telling me, don't mess it up, dude. You know, I took a lot of slings to get you 3 first-round picks. But you know, we laugh about it all the time. But I don't, I don't feel any pressure about it. B, I love it and embrace it because it's going to give us an opportunity to continue to try to turn the corner here and become a good football team. And I think what it really gives us is flexibility, and that's what I love about it. Obviously, you know, we can move up, and you got to know what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. You can try to increase your draft capital by moving down, or you stay the same. And the 4 of the first 35 picks gives you an opportunity to consider all those scenarios multiple times. And again, that's why we're opening up the line of communications with all the teams around the league. You know, I think I keep telling our guys, and you guys have heard me say this before, you know, we need to be nimble. And nimble means, depending on what the situation is, to be able to react quickly according to the situation and make the right decision.
How fine is that line between drafting for need
Yeah.
and drafting best available? Because with the, with the 4-12 record, and
Yeah.
as you said, all the holes all over the roster, you got a lot of needs.
You know, I'm the son of a coach, and I know how coaches think, and coaches think need, okay? And we're a coach-driven building. Our coaches are highly involved, and that's good. I embrace that. The flip side is you can't reach. You got to use some common sense, you know, and that's what I preach upstairs, is that if we're in a situation where we have two similarly rated players and one's a higher position of need, great, let's go get them. But if there's a discount, a disparity between the two, let's not reach for need, because the more you do that, the more you dilute your roster. And that's a conversation we've had a lot.
You find that players that reportedly are moving up and down as you,
Yeah.
is that media-driven or agent-driven BS, or does that kind of the truth? I mean, is your board pretty static, or do you have guys that have moved up and down a great deal?
I think a lot of it is media-driven, and you're trying to stay true to what your grades were coming through the fall and into February when you stacked the board the first time. But I'm not going to lie to you, there are guys that ran faster, they ran slower. We're finding more about them, medical or character, and it's more tangible things that cause the guy to move up or down. We get the medical rechecks back. I think John and I, is it tonight? What's today? Wednesday or Thursday? Tonight we get the medical rechecks back, and that can cause guys to move up or down a little bit. The character stuff, we get more and more information on character with guys. Those are tangible things that can change a football grade that have nothing to do with football, right? So they're real. It's the other stuff where I think people get carried away when a guy runs really, really fast at the combine. Did you see so-and-so ran 4.38? You know, you just have to be careful. You got to go back to the film.
Sitting there at forward, to what extent do you sort of try to imagine different ways that the first three picks could go, and do you kind of have a plan
Look,
for the way that
there's
you
a finite amount at 4, right? You know, and that's what we have to be prepared for. You know, regardless of the scenario, we have to be available, ready to pick at 4 and be excited about a player, right? Now, we might move up, we might move back. Who knows? We won't know till draft night. But if we're, quote, stuck at 4, we got to be ready to go. And that's a hell of a lot easier than worrying about all the permutations at 24 and 27 and 35.
Since we last talked to you, you signed Isaiah Crowell and Brandon Marshall. Mm-hmm. What do you like about those two guys?
Well, I mean, at running back, you know, we really are happy with Jalen Richard, third down change of pace. He and DeAndre Washington, we think, are as good a pair as any group in the league. But we've got a little bit of a hole at that kind of lead back. And Crowell's 26 years old. He's a power runner. He's a big dude that can move piles. And he also has some breakaway capabilities. So it's a one-year prove-it deal. We're hoping he comes in ready to go, protect our quarterback. You play for John, you know, you got to pass protect. You know, so there's some different things that running backs have to be aware of here. Brandon Marshall, we think, brings a veteran, big, physical presence to our linebacking core. So between him and Vontez, we think we got bigger. We got a little bit more mature. We've got guys that started a lot of games in this league, and hopefully that'll help us bring along some of the younger linebackers.
John's shown a willingness to take on players who have had locker room problems elsewhere. Maybe you too with the Antonio Brown signing deal. But are there guys in this draft who you red flag to the extent that you simply wouldn't take them, or is that a factor to be weighed in with everything else?
I think there's a balance in every building. And in our building, I think John will roll the dice a little more, and I think I'm a little more conservative. And I think that's a good balance. You know, we bounce that off ourselves all the time. We have some spirited meetings with the coaching staff where they're banging the table for a kid, and I might say he's got way too many red flags. I don't even want to consider him at that spot. And then we get into it. So I think that's healthy, and I think everybody that I've ever talked to that's sat in this chair has talked about the same thing. Healthy discourse between the coaches, the scouts, and trying to come to those kinds of agreements on those kinds of players.
The top 30 visits are a pretty valuable opportunity to get some quality face-to-face time with some of these prospects.
Yep.
One of those you've evaluated here in Alameda, at Oliver, Josh Allen, some
I
guys.
thought they weren't public, Michael. How you getting all this, man? What's going on?
What do
Can
you
you answer the question?
What do you? Flying through. What do you get out of those sorts of interactions with players who are projected to be pretty highly selected?
It doesn't matter who the player is. In our 30 visits, we have potential free agent guys, we have first round guys, we have middle round guys. We have a pretty good blend and balance on purpose. But what we get out of all of them is we get them in early in the morning. To the extent any of them hasn't been tested for anything that we're allowed to test, they didn't go to the combine, measurements, whatever, we get that done. But the biggest piece of it is a huge crunch of time with the coaching staff. 5, 6, 7 straight hours. And we want to find out which guys love it. It's easy to love it sitting in front of John Gruden for 10 minutes at 7 a.m. John's going to fire you up, and then John's going to hand you off to the offensive coordinator and then the position coach, and then you're going to watch film, and then we're going to come back, for 2 hours or 3 hours we're going to watch film. Then we're going to have a quick bite for lunch and then put you on the whiteboard and find out what you learned or didn't learn. So after 6 or 7 hours of nothing but football, tape, whiteboard, do you still love it as much as you did when John was telling you were going to be an all-pro at 7 a.m.? That's kind of the cool stuff is that you get to see. It's hard to fake it for 7 hours. For 15 minutes at the combine, that's a different conversation. But for 7 hours with these coaches grinding, putting all new terminology and names and things up on the board, asking you to regurgitate it back. Can you retain it after lunchtime? Which terminology are you using, your college or the Raiders? Which guys are in there at the end of 7 hours going, this is awesome, give me more. And there are other guys who are just like, man, when's my flight leave? So it's kind of cool.
Make some educated guesses about what's going to happen in front of you. That's a lot harder with those two later first-round picks, obviously. Do you spend any time projecting who might be there, or do you figure, if your board's set, that's all you need to do and you take who's there?
No, I think a big part of it is kind of sitting there and trying to understand, especially at, we have between 24, 27, and 35, we have 3 awesome opportunities. And I happen to think in most drafts, I happen to like 20 through 60. I always have. I think there are a lot of guys that love the game and are safer picks sometimes than top 10 picks. So I look at those picks in there, and you're constantly just kind of playing games with which 23 names are going to be off the board. Or we're going to get to 24, and what clump of guys are going to be there, and if that clump's there, which ones would you take? Which ones would you say I think might get to 35 or 27? And it's just, I think the more you do that and challenge yourself and challenge the people you work with to do that, the more familiar. I'm sorry, man. I'm not getting much sleep. The more familiar you will be on draft night. Wow.
We got time for two more guys. The 24, 27, 30, when you have the 3 picks that go together, how much of a factor is the depth of the position when you're going? If you have a couple positions you're interested in, one that's got a lot of guys available. How are you balancing that with maybe the top player on your board versus?
Yeah, I think you have to know all that. You have to know historically, for instance, how many pick a position, running backs. How many running backs typically go in the first 3 rounds? How deep's that running board draft now? Compared to, so is it going to be 7 or 8 running backs go, or 4 or 5, right? And if you need a running back and you're at 35 and then 106 with no 3rd-round pick, who might be there at 35 that won't be there at 106? And are you comfortable with that position versus a guard, a running back, a wide out, a tight end? So all that comes into the conversation at 24, 27, and 35 is the depth of the individual positions.
You guys, a lot has been made of your 4 picks in the top 35, and that's fantastic. No other team has that sort of capital at the top of the draft. You also have 0 picks from 36 to I think 105. Mm-hmm. Does that sit well with you, or if you have an opportunity to move back and maybe add a pick in that range, is that something that you guys will actively look to do?
Sure. I mean, like I said earlier, we'd move up, we'd move back. Personally, you heard me just say how much I love 20 to 60. I'd love to get a couple more picks in there. I just think we've got a lot of holes that need to be filled, and I think that's a really good place to go fishing. And if we can, we can. But the other cool thing is if we just do nothing but sit there and go 4, 24, 27, 32, you know, what we keep talking about upstairs is we better get 4 foundation football players. And we define foundation as talent and football character. That's what we want. When guys that love the game, and if we don't move up, down, or anywhere, man, we better get 4 of those guys.
When you look at throughout free agency, you guys have addressed a lot of needs where you could go into the season, if you don't get a linebacker, you'll be fine, or what have you. I say that given the look of your depth chart at edge rusher and defensive end right now, there just aren't a lot of bodies there. Are you at all concerned that other teams read that depth chart just like we do and think, oh, we could jump in front of them to get the edge rusher that we want? Do you think that that is an issue for you guys heading into this draft, knowing that edge rusher is such a...
You don't think we look at the media reports from the home media of all 31 teams? Just like they do with you guys, right? I mean, you guys know our roster better than anybody in the country. So people are looking at what we need just like we're looking at what they need. And we're doing the same thing. You know, who might need this position? Who might jump ahead of us? Where do we need to go get that guy? Because Team X needs a whatever position. So that's all part, I think, of the intrigue, the game of poker that this is.
Why go in depth for on-site visits with Murray and Haskins if you've got your quarterback?
I'm going to tell you the same thing, Jerry, I told you at the Combine and that I believe in. And I've said before, Derek Carr is a franchise quarterback, and we believe that, okay? Beyond that, just like at any other position, we're going to do our due diligence. And if we found somebody we liked better or thought had bigger upside, then you've got to do the right thing for the organization. Okay, but we love Dirk. We love what he brings to the table. But like every other position, we're going to do all of our due diligence. And I happen to work with a head coach that absolutely loves that position, and we're always going to know about those guys.